Okay, so we just watched the video, and he covered a lot of information, but I asked you to think of 2 questions to answer them for me. Is separation or segregation equal? And what are some things that we expect to be equal? Anyone care to share? Anyone have some thoughts?
I don't think segregation is equal.
Okay.
I don't think it is because, like, the example you brought up, sitting in a movie theater.
Right.
Like, for example, I mean, that's kind of like a small example compared to something larger, like.
You're right. Okay.
Like, for example, like, if a white person and an African American person have the same job.
Right.
Let's say, for example, like, the white person might only have to travel a certain distance, where the black person or the African American person might travel, like, 2 or 3 times as far.
Okay.
Like, so it's like, and on top of that, they probably don't have as many resources
Okay.
as white people would have.
So you're saying it's unfair that they're being treated different solely based on
Their skin color.
Their skin color.
Yes.
Okay. Awesome. Okay, so you don't think it's equal, don't think it's fair. What do you think's okay, and we talked about the movies, so you think public places should be equal? That anybody should be able to walk into a movie theater and sit wherever they want?
Yeah.
Do you think anyone should be able to go to the school that they want? Sit on the bus where they want?
They can bring up that point about the, what was it, I think the classroom in Texas about 3, or was that, I can't remember, I think it was you or the video, I can't remember, brought up 3 classrooms in the Texas schools with no library.
Okay. Awesome, you're paying attention, good,
And
I'm glad you brought that up.
And obviously, that's another example of African American people don't have the same rights.
Right.
They're not getting the same opportunity to learn.
Right.
So naturally, a white person is going to be smarter than an African American person.
If they're given anybody can be smart, quote unquote smart, or I like to think of it as anything is easy if you know it.
Because.
So they were given certain rights or advantages that kind of put them ahead of someone else. Okay.
Because I'm sure, like, I'm sure there was a lot of African American students who were probably just as smart, if not even smarter, than white students. They just weren't given the same opportunity.
Right.
And they didn't have the same resources to actually.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And on top of that, the teachers they probably had weren't even. They probably didn't have as good teachers teaching them as.
Right. I'm thinking
white
of the places actually. I mean, we'll kind of steer away from those types of things, but we'll steer to we talked about resources. A building is a resource.
We're learning about
if they went to a school that was older or some of these they said they would rather in certain areas down south they would rather close the school than integrate. So I think of how nice were these schools that they were just willing to shut them down versus bus these children, these students to other places. So that's a good point. Thank you for sharing. That was great. So I have one more question as we kind of think of this, and I want you to think of this the entire time, and I'll bring it up again at the end. Why was the Civil Rights Movement necessary? Think of that as we go to your packet. I want you to flip to the second page, and you see boxes and lines. That's going to be your timeline that we're going to be working with for the rest of the class. Yeah, go right ahead. Yeah, you can pull that's why I put the sticky notes on there. You can pull them off and sit them someplace. Just don't lose them. So I want you to look at that, but more importantly, flip to the page right after that, and you will see a pre-constructed or already set up timeline for you. This is outlining really important events in the Civil Rights Movement, and you see that it starts all the way back in 1861 is where they start noting dates. And if we think about that, we're talking about the 1950s, 1960s in America. We're going back pretty much exactly 100 years earlier, to talk about, the Civil Rights Movement through the Civil War. Isn't that kind of strange? And when we think of the Civil War, a lot of the time, what do we think it started from? What were the issues? The North and the South weren't getting along. But why weren't they getting along?
Slavery.
Yeah, they had differences of opinion on major issues, such as slavery. So, and we see that just kind of following. I want you to kind of look over this I'm gonna pair you guys up, you know, students up, everybody up, and into groups, small groups of 2 or 3. I think we have an uneven number, so that's fine. A couple groups of 3 is fine. And I want you to, I have highlighters up here. You guys can use pens, highlighters, anything. And there are some dates and some events bolded already. But I want you to take 5 minutes or so and go down and like just kind of read certain ones, certain dates, and what catches your eye. What do you think is important and why? It can be one of the top ones early on in the civil rights movement. It can be later down here. Just something that catches your eye that you think is really important, and I want you to think of why you feel it's important. I mean, for me as a teacher, I'll share mine first real quick while you're kind of looking that over. I think Brown versus the Board of Education Supreme Court case is important, 1954. Because as a teacher, this stated that separate isn't equal, and that included schools. So I, as a teacher, have to teach, and should teach, I feel this way, every student in my room. So that's important to me, both as an individual and as a teacher. And I'll give you another minute or so for that, okay? How's it coming, Matt? Okay?
Yeah, it's like,
Okay. I see you got a couple things highlighted, a couple things circled. What are you thinking?
I'm thinking focusing on the civil rights era.
Okay. The specific time period. All right. Awesome.
Kind of like, I mean, obviously it's in chronological order. I'm trying to like pick out the ones that I feel like.
Really, really big stuff.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, good. Seems like you're on point. Lee, how's it going? Got anything?
Yep. I was kind of focusing on the pre-civil rights era
Okay.
stuff. Tried to find some of the big ones, the ones that I knew about.
Okay, so you're looking at like past experience, what you know of.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool, great, awesome. Okay, a couple more seconds to finish up, making notes or something. I thought something was really interesting. It seems like some groups were really focusing on different areas on the timeline. Like I noticed some groups were really focusing early on, and some groups were focusing later, like closer to, you know, right now, I guess. So I'm going to have you guys share 1 or 2 things that all of us might not be aware of. Matt, would you mind sharing?
The first one I actually had was 1954 Brown versus Board of Education.
Okay.
Or Brown versus Board of Education Supreme Court case.
Okay, so you focused on the Civil War or the
Civil rights.
Civil rights era. Yes,
Yes.
thank you.
Because it was the first, I guess the first notable court case that involved, you know, the education and, you know, trying
Right.
to help
Yeah.
African
Awesome.
American, you know, attempting to create equality.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. You hit the nail right on the head. That was awesome. You're right there. And that's like what I said too. I mean, that's important to me. That's important to you. That affects kind of everyone, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even right now. Okay, Lee, you had a really interesting way of doing this. You focused on information you already knew about. Is there something there you specifically you want to share that you feel the rest of us should know?
Well, I like that in 1947, Jackie Robinson was the first African American to play in Major League Baseball.
Okay, and why do you... Okay, we're talking baseball, but why do you think, you know, which a lot of people consider the American sport. We're very, very avid baseball fans, a lot of us. You know, I'm a Pirates fan. My family is a Pirates fan. That's just kind of, you know, we're big into that. I see some people making faces. Anyway, we don't all have to share the same teams.
Yeah.
That's fine. You know, healthy, civil
No discrimination.
disagreement.
No discrimination is going on.
No discrimination. Yes, thank you. So why do you think Jackie Robinson becoming the first African American to play Major League Baseball in America was significant or important?
I think that was important because, like you said, it is a national pastime, and that put him on a national stage, and it made more people see that, you know, he could do that just as well as the white people could. And he did go through a lot before he was able to get there. Conflicts with teammates, and thankfully he had some people that believed in him and stuck behind him so he could do it.
Even when he got there, he was still threatened, like,
Mm-hmm.
on a regular
Yeah,
basis.
it was always a struggle,
Yeah.
right? He had to work twice as hard than someone else might have. But yeah, you brought up that it was, it's a national pastime. It put him, people saw him then every day, all the time on television. And what you really said about, he could play baseball as good as the white people. I think all that speaks to is people saw him as a person. They didn't see the color of his skin. So that's where the inequality part of segregation and separating everyone out came from. We didn't see, a lot of groups of people didn't see each other as people. So we really need to think of that too. I just want you guys to keep in mind your timeline because we are going to use it. It's part of your homework. I'll go over a little later. But as for right now, I know we watched the other video, and it was to give you context and information and kind of an idea of what was going on and what the time was like, what America was like, what we were thinking about, what we needed, what we wanted, what people were thinking. But I want you to think of how important this whole matter is. I know we talked about, why the civil rights movement was important, why. But I want you to think of how important us talking about this is. We're going to watch this other short video.
I'll get the lights.
Yes, please, if you could get the lights for me.